technology as its own sector, which is some people talk about tech as just kind of its own industry. Technology touches everything we do. It touches every sector of our economy. And so I do think that we all need to make sure we're keeping that in the way that we expect it to. What are our goals with policy to protect sensitive personal information? Are we able to do that? What do we need to put in place? What are the rules? What's the enforcement mechanism? How does this work? A national data privacy bill doesn't necessarily alone ensure that outcome, but it is important because we have a better sense of where data is coming from, what's being collected, how it's used, and in a sense, the integrity of that data. Who are in many cases trying to do the right thing, know what the right thing is, and are actually doing it to build that trust out in our communities, and then also making sure that there are consequences for bad actors. Moving and leading the way. We're the innovators, as you said, we are global leaders. We need to be global leaders in policy too.
Welcome to the Regulating AI podcast. Join host Sanjay Puri as he explores the dynamic and developing world of artificial intelligence governance. Each episode features deep dives with global leaders at the forefront of regulating AI responsibly, tackling the challenges using AI can bring about head-on and enabling balance without hindering innovation.
Welcome to Regulating AI, the podcast dedicated to exploring the intricate world of artificial intelligence regulation. I'm your host, Sanjay Puri, and today we have the honor of hosting Congresswoman Suzan DelBene from Washington's 1st Congressional District. Congresswoman brings a wealth of experience to the conversation with a background as a very successful technology entrepreneur and business leader. Her insights into the intersection of technology, policy, and regulation will undoubtedly shed light on the complexities of shaping a fair AI regulatory framework. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is an important area to talk about.
Wonderful. Congresswoman, we have a global audience. Our audience is made up of members of Congress, their staff, think tanks, tech CEOs, and people who practice AI around the world. So can you, for their benefit, share your personal journey and background that led you to become a champion for online privacy and responsible AI?
Well, first, I had a long career before coming to Congress in the technology industry and also with startups. In fact, I never thought I would run for Congress. I ran for Congress because I grew up in a family that had a lot of challenges, financial challenges in particular, and felt like it was important that we do everything possible to make sure that people had access to opportunity, especially in a world that was changing quickly in a lot of ways because of technology. So after my career in technology, I got involved in policy and got frustrated with policy and wanted to make a difference. So like any good entrepreneur, I jumped in to try to make a difference and ran for office. And so here I am. I think that technology is critically important. And one thing, I'll probably highlight this many times in our conversation, but it's not just technology as its own sector, which is some people talk about tech as just kind of its own industry. Technology touches everything we do. It touches every sector of our economy. And so I do think that we all need to make sure we're keeping that lens as part of how we view the issues that we face in policy and be thoughtful about technology, the impacts and how that's changing the way we work, the way we live, the way we communicate. And these are incredible opportunities and challenges for us.
I think, Congresswoman, you said it right. Technology touches almost everything, whether you drive through a McDonald's or you're working on a factory floor or you're working in a high-tech company. It's not the Googles of the world who are just doing technology. I think we are doing technology as we speak right now using this online forum. But I think it's great that we have people with your background, Congresswoman, because you understand the implications of technology, especially when such a transformative technology is in front of us and the regulations that are going to, and some of the things that we're going to really talk about it. What you recently did an op-ed in Newsweek. Can you emphasize the importance of a national privacy law as the foundation of effective AI regulation? Can you expand on why privacy is the fundamental building block for this regulatory framework, Congresswoman?
Well, absolutely. AI is fed by data,
Mm-hmm.
lots and lots and lots of data. And when we talk about kind of how AI functions, what the kind of results are and responses are that come out of AI, that's based on data. And Chat GPT was trained on 45 terabytes of data. I always kind of try to help people think in terms of what that might mean. Over 200 days worth of HD video, just the immense quantity of data. But if we have data that is acquired in ways that it shouldn't have been, that contains sensitive personal information, that really, when we talk about foundations, that's the foundational element that AI sits on top of. If we have challenges with our data and the integrity of our data, then that's going to make us all question and be concerned about kind of what the outcome is from AI too. So I've been a strong supporter for a long, long time since I came to Congress for a national consumer data privacy standard. We need people to be able to be in control of their data. We need to make sure that that it's clear where data comes from. Right now, AI developers don't need to disclose where their data, might be coming from. We need to make sure that data that's protected is protected, and also make sure that people aren't storing or selling personal data, especially without any permission to do so. So we've seen, other EU has worked on data privacy legislation, GDPR, but a few states in the US have moved on privacy legislation, but we need a federal law. We need a consistent standard. We don't really have a seat at the international table on these issues if we don't have a domestic standard, and that's going to be true probably on everything that we talk about, why domestic policy is going to be important here. But it's also the first piece. It's the foundational piece that we need to build on top of.
So it is the first piece, it's the foundational piece, Congresswoman. Why has it been so hard for the United States? You've seen the GDPR has been out there for some time. What challenges do you see for us? As you said, some states have done it. You worked for companies. Certainty is a very important thing for companies to know rather than a patchwork of things that they have to deal with. So tell our audience, why has it been so hard for us to have something going?
Well, first of all, I think the biggest challenge at the beginning has been in an area where folks don't feel like they really quite understand it. Putting together policy together, especially the first version of a policy, presents a high bar. Folks don't want to move something forward. In fact, I think the tendency, and probably everyone relates to this, there's always a tendency to do nothing. As opposed to do something, especially something where you're not sure and it's in an area where you may not understand it as deeply or understand what the long-term implications might be. I think that and that's true for privacy, but that's going to probably be true for a lot of technology policy that we look at. We have to start, and we're going to start, and we need to put policies in place, and then we need to see what's working and what's not working. Kind of the entrepreneurial process, what's working, what's not working, and adjust and keep policy up to date and making sure that it's delivering. I'm glad that there's kind of a renewed focus on privacy and hope that that's a step forward. I don't think partisanship has really been the issue here. I think it's just been hard to get people to take that first step.
So taking that first step, so let's just say if that happens, Congresswoman, how would that help mitigate some of the risks of bias, discrimination in some of the AI-powered systems, especially as you have seen in the facial recognition kind of technology, Congresswoman?
So I think one, to ensure that systems aren't discriminatory, and let's be clear, the systems are built however they're built, people design them. If they're based on data, then we need to make sure the data is representative, and that means having diverse data sets and good old testing over and over to see if we detect or biases to see where things may or may not be working as they would be expected to, and to understand why that is. A national data privacy bill doesn't necessarily alone ensure that outcome, but it is important because we have a better sense of where data is coming from, what's being collected, how it's used, and in a sense, the integrity of that data, which will be hugely helpful. But these are where it's going to be an ongoing, and already is an ongoing, iterative process to make sure that technology is working the way expected, or that people are testing various scenarios to see where there might be gaps in technology. So all of that needs to happen, but again, it's sitting on top of a bunch of data, and we got to make sure that we have integrity in that data.
Having integrity on that data, I think, is a very important point. Congresswoman, shifting to AI regulation, we've had a lot of your colleagues on the show, and the challenge they say is, how do they keep pace with a technology that is evolving so rapidly? What role should Congress play in setting the rules of the road for AI regulation? Because you've seen large language models, multimodal agents. Now people are talking about AGI based on whatever. Uh, how does regulation keep pace? And what is the role of Congress here, Congresswoman?
Well, we're behind. I think we all have to admit we're behind. And one way we keep pace is we get in the game, getting moving on important policy like privacy. And we need to really understand and start setting the guardrails around the development of technologies. When kind of in the early days of computing, everything seemed like it was a net positive. And I think we have seen more and more the scenarios, the very concerning scenarios that can happen when technology is used in a way that is either unexpected or intentionally damaging. So it is important that Congress plays a role there in a variety of ways. We're going to see our adversaries continue to develop and use AI. So this becomes a national security issue, and an issue that's going to be critical as we look at defense. It's an issue in terms of protecting civil rights and civil liberties. It's an issue in terms of also making sure that people's personal information, as we talked about, is protected too. So we need to ensure that here at home, AI is used in the positive and beneficial ways that it can be, and is not being used in the harmful or discriminatory ways that it can be. And that means guardrails, understanding what we can put in policy, or even kind of the outcomes that we'd like to see, making sure that we have enforcement in ways so we can actually, people know that policies that are put in place are going to be enforced. One thing that I talked a lot about when it came to privacy, for example, is audit, to make sure that people actually are protecting data in the way they're supposed to, not just waiting until something bad happens. So I think that's another area we need to think of along these lines, is what can we do to learn to make sure that folks who are in many cases trying to do the right thing know what the right thing is and are actually doing it, to build that trust out in our communities. And then also making sure that there are consequences for bad actors. So there's the policy, there's the enforcement side that goes along with that. But you're right, policy is slow. We're going to have to learn to be more nimble to keep up. But I keep going back, but we got to get started. And then we can talk about iterating and learning from that. Not everything is about policy, but we can do kind of that large, important framework that makes sure that we're upholding the appropriate protections and ensuring that all parties are living up to those expectations.
So enforcement and getting started soon, I think those are some of the key points that you're making. Congresswoman, you've been in the world of technology, startups, etc. Uh, there's this argument or this point that comes across from a lot of our guests, whether it's tech CEOs or policymakers, innovation versus regulation. Innovation, we always say the US innovates, the European Union regulates. How does one keep that balance? What are your thoughts on innovation and regulation?
Well, first, I think that it's really important when we look at any type of regulatory environment, we understand what our goals are and understand the impact any types of regulations would have on innovators. I come from a background of working on the innovation side and working on the business side. And so I do think it's really important in policy, and sometimes this gets left out, that we understand the impact of policy on the ground. There's theoretically kind of ideas in policy that sound good, but could actually create many other problems in trying to meet their goal. We also have the opportunity to put policies in place that can also inspire and support innovation. So that kind of constant back and forth dialogue with innovators, with folks who are actually using technology in various sectors and understand the impacts that decisions we make would have on not only how they develop products or how they sell products, I think is really important, because we want to make sure that we understand the impacts on the ground of any policy. And when we actually keep that in mind, I think we can put together policy that meets the goals that we need, even maybe some narrow goals to start off, but meets those goals and continues to support and allow innovation to thrive. As you said, folks in the entrepreneurial community, in the business community, they want as much certainty as they can get. They are in a place that inherently has a lot of risk. Things don't always work that way that they're expected. But the more we can provide policy guidelines, the more folks know what they have to keep in mind when they're developing, and that can be hugely helpful also.
So you talked about certainty. So what do you think about international cooperation, Congresswoman, in terms of regulation? The EU AI Act is obviously now passed the parliament. It's moving towards implementation. We are still trying to get things going. But if you are a large company that's working globally, you want some kind of a harmonization or some kind of that I don't have to. I mean, large companies can have armies of lawyers, but small companies can't. So what are your thoughts in terms of international cooperation, in terms of rules, regulations on AI?
Well, first of all, we need to be rule makers, not rule takers. And part of that means that we have to be moving and leading the way. We're the innovators, as you said, we are global leaders. We need to be global leaders in policy too. The EU has moved faster on privacy, on AI regulations, and they started with privacy first back in 2016, and have moved forward, and we still haven't taken that first step. Others aren't going to wait. The Chinese government has moved quickly on AI, although we should be alarmed about kind of the protectionist and anti-democratic way that they proceeded. So it is very important that we have a seat at the international table. But it is hard to have a seat at the international table when we don't have domestic policy in place, when we haven't developed our own point of view of what we want to see. So if we are going to provide that long-term direction internationally, and that represents our values, I think it's critical for us to develop that policy domestically, and have a strong point of view of where we stand, of what we want to see, and then we can really talk with the international community about the direction and how important it is that we get there. We're trying to do both at the same time, but I think we are much more effective when we have strong domestic policy in place.
So have strong domestic policy in place, lead rather than follow, Congressman. That's a great point. Talking about some of the issues regarding the regulations. How are the concerns of marginalized communities and underrepresented groups going to be effectively incorporated in some of the AI policymaking process, Congresswoman?
Well, this is a huge issue, an important issue that I think has to be part of all the work going forward. Ensuring that diverse and marginalized communities have a seat at the table is a critical first step. We need to make sure that voices are heard, not only in the policy making, but also in the development of AI, because folks can say, you know, those simple words, did you think about X? Really help drive forward kind of how products are designed, written, thought through. Kind of those initial product specifications are developed with a point of view, even starting there and making sure that there's a diverse point of view on the goals of a product, how they might be used, and where there might be intentional or unintentional biases that are built in. That's going to be critically important from the very beginning of development all the way through to for the development of product, I should say, and the development of policy, all the way through to finalizing that. So let's make sure that we have a lot of people coming together and talking and learning from each other, because I think that's the way we can be the most effective.
So talk to a lot of people so that we can be most effective addressing those concerns. Congresswoman, when you look at social media, it's dominated by a few companies, our town halls, as you know, whether it's 5, 6, 7, whatever the number of companies at least dominate them. The fear is that there could be something similar within AI, because AI is so, you just talked about the terabytes of data it takes to train it. So it's the chips, it's the resources, the people, the data centers. Only large companies to a large extent can afford it. What can we do to make sure we don't repeat the example of the social media and there are no monopolies for AI?
Well, I think, innovation is key. And kind of as we were discussing a bit earlier, making sure that we have a strong innovative environment is important, because that next idea that is disruptive and kind of moves us forward could be starting anywhere. And so we need to make sure that also has a big impact on new leaders, new ways, new types of technologies, new ways about thinking of things, and kind of keeps everybody doing their best in terms of thoughtfully moving forward versus kind of monopolistic control and kind of preventing any type of innovation. So I think that's going to be the ongoing work. And we've seen a lot in technology where small players can be disruptive. I think actually putting good policy in place can be really helpful here, because the folks who can really be hurt the most in the absence of policy, but also or in the presence of bad policy, are the smaller businesses, the smaller players who, this is one reason on privacy I've been so focused on federal policy, because if a small company has to live up to the standards set by 50 different states that all might be different, they may never even be able to get into the market in most states, because the burden of just the regulatory obligations would be too great. If we can make sure that we have whatever policies are put in place allow even those small players to have that certainty and clarity so that they can move forward, it allows them to be competitive also. So I actually think we can do a lot in policy to help ensure that competitiveness, that ability for innovators all across the country to continue to be involved and engaged, and kind of prevent anything from being dominated by any one particular player. But policy can also be hurtful there, which is why we have to be really thoughtful. And in this case, why I think federal policy in a lot of cases will be really important.
So federal policies would really help create a level playing field, Congresswoman. Congresswoman, finally, I wanted to ask a question which we have asked to a lot of people here. There are all kinds of reports that talk about that a major transformation in employment is about to happen in our society because of AI. All kinds of numbers. You could take 20%, 30%, 40%, etc. But every expert says that something is going to happen, a major. Does Congress have a role in making sure our workforce is ready? Because those are not numbers, those are families and those are people. So how do we make sure that, yes, the companies have a responsibility. Does Congress have a responsibility in this too?
Well, education is key. And I'd say starting at the very beginning, we've got to support education, early learning, and make sure that kids all across our country, from every zip code across our country, are able to get the education, learn the skills that are going to be critical for whatever work they may do going forward. And we know that technology is going to be part of pretty much whatever they do. We saw during COVID, communities in my region, a huge technology region that I represent, and that some parts of our communities are in areas that don't have broadband or even good cell service. So when it came to online learning, we had communities who had no opportunity there. So when we think about making sure that we put the skills, make sure the skills are there in our workforce, and that we make sure those opportunities impact everyone across our country. It does come down to things like broadband and access. It does come down to making sure that folks all have access to a great education, that we think about integrating technology in, even in early learning, because it's going to be part of everything that someone does. And it's important that we think about it when we are talking to workforce and folks who are making changes, moving into different area in the workforce, are going through disruption. Education is key to that too. Apprenticeships and the work that we do to help people be trained. So at the federal level, it means making sure that there's funding, making sure that we have the infrastructure in place throughout our country. Across the board, that means investment and really tracking to see how we're doing. And I also think when we talk about diversity, it's important that we have opportunities for everyone. I was recently at a new robotics program in a middle school in my district, and it was great to see that all kids were participating and exciting, and maybe didn't even know how much they were learning when they were building the robot, how much they were learning a little bit about electronics and programming. And so we know the best experience is when you are having fun and you're learning without even knowing you're learning. So there's a huge role we can play at all levels of government as part of that, but across our communities to make sure everyone has those opportunities.
I think those are great points. Government providing some funding, infrastructure, education is the key, and our communities also standing up and making it fun for people to learn and enjoy learning. Thank you, Congresswoman, really for sharing such valuable insights on the complex issues that are surrounding AI regulation. Your perspective as a leader from technology and public policy has given our listeners a deeper understanding of the challenges and opportunities for shaping a fair and equitable AI regulatory framework. So to our audience, stay tuned for more engaging discussions on regulating AI as we continue to explore the dynamic landscape of artificial intelligence and its impact on society. Until next time, I'm Sanjay Puri signing off. Congresswoman, this has been fantastic. We hope that you come back again. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks, Sanjay.
Thank you.